Creating icons is definitely a subset of interface design and web design in general. And there are people that consider themselves icon designers, and they focus exclusively on icons. But as interface designers, as people crafting interfaces, there are plenty of times when we might need to create our own icons. And there's absolutely no reason that we shouldn't learn to do this skill, even if we're not always gonna do it, because it's actually not that difficult to understand the technical ways to create basic icons. I don't want to diminish the skill of icon design in any way, because to create really unique and different icons is an art form in and of itself. But there are definitely ways that we can jumpstart our own abilities to create icons directly inside of our design tool. So a while back, I created this intro to icons.com course that teaches the fundamentals of icon design in about an hour. And each one of these icons is a separate lesson. I teach how to design each one of these in Illustrator and in Sketch. So if you want to go really deep on these two software programs, then by all means, go to this website and check it out. But for today, we're going to look at designing these icons inside of Figma. So I've pulled all of them in here, and you can see I've got each one of these in a master symbol. So if I change any of these icons, you can see it's kind of updating. And one of the most important things to know here is that most interfaces, a 24 by 24 artboard is going to be the best size for your icons. In the rare exception, you might use a 16 by 16, and sometimes you might use a 32. But for the most part, a great starting point is going to be 24 by 24. When you use these icons inside of an interface, you're going to treat it as a block. Remember, everything is a box inside of an interface, and even letter forms have their own box. And so icons are going to be no different. So we want to start with, if we're creating our own icons, and we're going to be using shapes, lines, and a little bit of the pen tool, but as basic as we can possibly get. So let's go ahead and just quickly create some 24 by 24 frames here. Simple profile icon. We're going to do a circle. So we're going to do 12 by 12. And then I'm just going to create a rectangle down here below. Let's call it 18 by 8. And now I'm going to return to get into, if I hit return, I can access these points in here. So I'm going to select these 2 points and just shift nudge this thing up. And let's say we want to add a stroke instead of a fill. This is easy to do. We just take the fill off and add a stroke. Let's call it a 2 pixel. And sometimes if you're doing stroked icons, it can be easier to add these to the center, because you'll get some interesting things that are happening if you add it to the inside or outside. And adding things to the center, the stroke to the center instead of the outside, will allow you to a little bit more intelligently line these up instead of overlapping them like that. So if I hit Command Y, it's going to show me preview like outline mode. So I can toggle back and forth. So keeping these on the center, if you're doing the stroked icon style, is a little bit simpler. So if we want to get rid of this bottom line here, I'm just going to click this point and hit delete. Sometimes you want to make a little stylistic decision and have either hard edge lines, or maybe you want to do these rounded caps. Why is that not rounding? Come on. Could it be that this is causing an issue? Yeah, sometimes the corner radius, for whatever reason, the corner radius adding to a shape like that will cause those caps to not be quite rounded. So instead of going all the way up, might just want to go in there, and you could definitely cheat these in a little bit if you're not quite getting the radius that you want. Just want to make sure that you keep it consistent. And if our head looks a little too big, we can hold Command and do left, up, left, up. We're going to want to keep these at even numbers. Because we're using a 2 pixel stroke, we're going to want these to be even. But if we're using a 3 pixel stroke, let me just copy this down. If we're using a 3 pixel stroke for whatever reason, this would be Actually, that would be okay. What happens here, if you hit Control P, you can see that you've got about a pixel and a half bleeding over from the edge. So depending on the style, you might consider putting these on a half pixel. So this would live on 6.5 if you wanted that hard edge to be there. This is probably getting a little bit too into the weeds for this particular problem. I think if you have 3 pixels and as long as you're having everything looks nice and lined up, screens are sharp enough these days to where you're not quite gonna see these pixel bleeds and it be that big of a deal. Back when there weren't as many Retina screens, this was an issue, but nowadays it's not really that big of a deal. So that's our 3 pixel icon. Well, what if we wanted to do like a solid shape? Most icons in iOS now are solid. So let's say we wanted to go back to a solid shape. So we take off the stroke and we add a fill to these. Well, the fill is not gonna add to this path that we cut. So we're gonna select both of these points and hit Command J, which is gonna join that. So now we can, I always like to work in black and white first. So now this is gonna give us a little bit of a profile icon. When we're working with filled shapes, we wanna make sure that the same way that we're kind of aware that our pixel lines are working really nicely together here, when we're working with solid icons, we want to make sure that we are very aware of how much space is between the individual shapes. So right here, that's a 2 pixel difference and that's a 1 pixel difference. And a lot of times you're going to have to zoom out and use these in context with your UI before you figure out what works best. But let's say we want to keep this rounded theme going. So now we can select these individual corners and maybe we just give it like 1 or 2 and just kind of play with it like that. And you can always modify these points in and out based on what kind of style you want. So let's go in a little bit tighter with 1, 2 over, 1, 2. And so that looks like a pretty decent icon. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this third one here. So we'll create like a stroked version and a filled version of each of these. All right, so I'm gonna select this. This one's simple enough. We're really just gonna draw a rectangle here. And I'm gonna Command Option C and Command Option V to just paste that style. And we're gonna go with probably like a 4 pixel radius there. And now I'm gonna use the pen tool to go there. I'll just do a small one to start with. I'm holding the Shift key, so I'm maintaining my either 0 degree or 45 degree angle, and it'll let you know once you've hit that same top point there. And I do that just to make sure that I know that this is a true 90 degree angle. If I did something like this and brought it way over there, it would just be a little bit messed up. So now I can put it there, Command Option V, and I don't want this bleeding over like that. So I'm gonna just nudge that down and over a little. And then I can just grab this, pull it to right there. And we're gonna check, we wanna make sure that our measurements on each side are equal. If I pulled it over too far, you can see that's a 4 pixel difference and this is a 5. So we wanna make sure it's like right in there. And as we're designing these, we wanna make sure that we're leaving a similar amount of breathing room around the outside. And you know, this might even be a little bit too far down. We might wanna bring that up a bit. Like right in there, and then that means we might have to go in here and change this a little. And then if we weren't happy with the way this was rounding like that, another thing we can do is we can actually just draw kind of a similar thing that we did on this piece right here. Actually, I'll just copy this over here, and I'm gonna do a Shift V to vertically change that. And then I'll make it a little bit larger. Hold Command over this while we have the pen tool selected. And then that'll allow us to just bring out these big handlebars. These big handlebars that we can adjust the curve of that point. That way, this is more of a custom shape, and that's not going to affect the endpoints the way our other one was. See how this one is kind of affected by, we're trying to mathematically round this. So that's just kind of a way that you can customize that edge right there. And this one, we might want to round that a little bit. We're not too worried about it being everything mathematically correct. We just kind of want this nice and rounded look here. All right, so moving right along, we're gonna do this lock. So basically just gonna keep this basic outline shape, but you can tell we don't have enough room for our little lock handle. So I'm just gonna make this a little smaller. I might want to make sure this is kind of aligned here to the bottom edge. So as we're designing this, we're kind of zooming out, making sure that all of this kind of looks the same. So I'm gonna create a little rectangle, Command Option V to paste that same style. And then I want these to be fully rounded. So in order to kind of get this little squatty look, you can tell that we're gonna have to make this a little bit smaller. I'm actually using quite a bit larger of a rectangle here, but it's not a problem. Just move this down again. So we could make this a little bit taller if we wanted to give, because you want this to kind of have you want it to be optically centered. So it's okay, I think, if this little thing is sticking above, because our optical center is gonna kind of defy some of the mathematics here. So now I'm gonna hit the L key to draw just a simple line. And then I'm going to do Command Option V on that line, put that right in the middle, hold Option to check, make sure we're good on each side. The lines do a little bit of a weird thing. Well, they will measure from one side. So you can see I've got 6 to the left here and then 8 on the right. But I know that this is 2 pixels wide, so that's totally fine. If that was throwing you off a bit, you could hit the R key to pull up the rectangle tool and do a 2 pixel shape. And then just round those corners, make it dark like that. And again, I just want to make sure that I've got the same amount of space on each side. So you can see this one's a little different. It's a little smaller than that one. But in terms of the size, I think it works with the other one here. So we don't have to be 100% exact. I'm not going to design this one because it's really the exact same thing that we did here. This one, all we got to do here, let's actually delete that. We'll grab our large shape here, click the frame name, paste it in. And really, we've just got a line that goes across here. So I'm gonna hit the L key and draw a line right across here. Command Option C off of that, and then Command Option V onto that. And we wanna make sure we're aware of the negative space in here. We don't want it to be too tight, and we don't wanna use a 1 pixel line in here, unless this was a very specific style where we used a 2 pixel line for the outlines and then a 1 pixel line for the detail. But I just want to start off really, really simple, lay these out. Everything's going to use the exact same stroke, the exact same style. So we're going to make sure we keep this at 2 pixels. Let's do another L key line, Command Option V, and these are going to be our little rings for the calendar. And so you can see this is not exactly the same as that one, but I'm just trying to make it look good, and this is not necessarily looking bad. So I'm okay with that. We might want to make these 1 pixel longer so they come in and they have a little bit more depth. So that looks pretty good. Let's move right along. And let's delete these out so we can create this kind of edit or post icon. So what I'm going to do here is get into this shape, and I'm going to put a point right there and put a point right there. And then I'm going to select this point, and I'm actually going to delete it. So now I've got this open shape, and you can see that these are opened up a little bit more. But that's okay. We'll just create this pencil really quickly. So again, this is just a rectangle. So we'll just draw a little bit of a rectangle. It doesn't really matter what size to begin with. And we're gonna hit Command Option V to paste on our style. We don't want this one to be quite as rounded, so I'm gonna take that rounded radius off. So hit Return to get inside of this thing. We're gonna add a point right there. We're going to hit the V key to get to our selection tool and select these two while holding Shift. And then we'll just nudge this up a few times. That's 1, 2, that's 3, 2 or 3, either one could work. I'll try 3 to start with. Now I'm gonna select this, and if I hover right near the edge, you'll get that icon changing. So this one's gonna rotate. We're gonna hold shift to rotate it at 45 degrees. And now I can kind of move this into place. And now I kind of want this to be optically centered, like right in there, but you can tell it might start to feel a little bit tight. So what we can do is go back into this shape and select that point, move it over, let's say 2 pixels over, 2 pixels down, and maybe we can bring that back in a little bit. And if we want, we can make this pencil a little bit longer. But if we scale it, you can see we're kind of messing up our angles right here. So we can either a lot of times it's easier to work when it's not at an angle. So I might do this and select these points and go like, okay, 2 pixels taller. That will keep the bottom part intact. Or maybe we wanted to go even a little squattier with our point. Now we can go back and reverse the rotation again, pull this one out, put this one back in, maybe something like that. But maybe this feels too long and maybe you don't want to keep rotating it back and forth. Another thing you can do is just go into it right here. And if I go over to the left and then down 1, that'll keep the constraints in place. So I can kind of keep going left, down, left, down, left, down, or upright, 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 to change the kind of length of that without having to rotate back and forth. Same thing with editing these points. I can go up and then over, and that'll keep the same kind of variation in the perspective, so we're not kind of skewing it in a weird way. Because if we went up like that, obviously that's gonna mess things up. I think this one's probably self-explanatory based on the way I just did that one. This settings icon, this will be kind of a fun little trick here. So what we're gonna do on the settings icon, we're gonna actually grab the star tool. We're gonna create a star, doesn't matter how big. Go, let's see, 20 by 20. And then we can actually change how many points we have. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we'll leave this one at 8. And we can also change the angle of these points, down and up. So we're gonna make this be like right in there for now. Or if we are gonna be kind of OCD about this, let's go to 80% instead of 81%. And now I can just add some corner radius to this thing. But I could also play again with how deep I want this thing to look. So we could go like with a very specific knobby kind of style, or maybe it's a little bit more of a bloated icon. We can kind of play around with that, the mathematics of those curves. And so even though this is 20 by 20, we can tell it's not as big as even as big as this 18 pixel rectangle here. So we can actually scale this up. Even if we come outside of the frame, it's okay. We just want to make sure that we're aware of these lines in here. But we are going to add our stroke. So let's go ahead and do that and see what things look like. All right, so now I think we're safe to scale this up a bit. Scale it up to there. I think that'll work. And then we'll just draw our circle in here. Command Option V. This odd number is not going to quite center correctly in here, so we want to make sure we go 6 by 6. Center that. So you can tell this is a little bit different than that, but that's okay. I think we're starting to get a nice look here. Okay, last one here I want to show. This one's a little bit tricky, but that's the fun thing about designing your own icons. You can really start to break down icons into specific shapes. Like, okay, that's a rectangle that's been rotated and a piece has been taken out. Or that's a circle and this is a conjoined circle and square, or that's a line. So this one's gonna be a fun little icon to show. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna draw a rectangle and we're gonna add our style. And having this as a rounded rectangle, that's totally fine because we want that to be that way. So if we look at this, we can tell this is really a rounded rectangle with a bit of a chunk taken out, the same way that we took this chunk out. So now we can just go in here, hit return, and let's put a point right there and a point right there, just like we did on our other one. And we're gonna delete this, and that gives us a nice little, kind of a similar style here, but we need to make sure that this is going to be okay. Let's actually pull the corner radius down on, I'll change all of this to 3 because that's kind of affecting the way that's working. But once we do that, we can just option drag this right over here. And now I'm gonna do Shift H and Shift V to rotate that. So we have something starting to look like a bit of a link. We might actually want to bring in this point one more time, and then we'll go into that one, bring that point over. That'll give us a little bit more room to shift this. And so we'll grab both of these and then rotate that like that. And if that's feeling a little bit large, we might want to rotate it back and select each of these shapes. And maybe we bring in this, just these 2 pixels, or just these 2 points, bring them in one, just to kind of give it a little bit better feel. The other one looked like it could have been slightly too large. And then we rotate that. And this is a stylistic thing. I mean, you could rotate it that way. You could leave it this way. It still looks like a link. I'm kind of partial to that version as well. So there's our link. And the same thing that would be, like if we wanted to make any of these a filled icon, for example, we have to remove the stroke and add the fill. Again, I like to start with black. And for these, we might want to go with white just so we can see it. But then we don't really want to have an actual shape on top of the shape. So instead of having this white extra shape, what we really want to do is select both of these and use our little Pathfinder tool up here. So we're going to subtract the selection. So watch what happens when I click this. Watch the layers here. Boom. It's going to turn this into a subtracted shape here. And this will directly affect the way the SVG code is written inside of everything. See, this is 24 by 24. But if we wanted to, we could grab this subtracted shape and we could change this to 20 by 20 up here. Sometimes it can cause a little bit of pixel edge oddness. So we might want to go 6 by 6 on that. We'd want to make sure this is not on an odd percentage, on an odd decimal number there. So if we put that right in the center, that's going to perfectly center that right in there. So that's a way that we can kind of create these filled icons. If you want to learn more about this a little more slowly and methodically, especially if you want to see it in Sketch or Illustrator, check out Intro to Icons. But this will be the first lesson on just using basic shapes to create your icons inside of these 24 by 24 containers. So for homework, I would encourage you to dig into this Figma file and try to recreate these icons that you see in here. You can just duplicate it into your own drafts and then just recreate those icons. And then as a bonus, try to recreate 4 additional icons. Something like a home icon or a list icon or photo, video, filter, just 4 or 5 more icons in the same kind of style. And maybe you modify it by like a 2 pixel stroke. Maybe you try to go and you create your full set of nothing but filled icons. So I'd love to see your work, post it, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.